Hey you guys, what's up? In today's video, I have for you my face palette declutter. I did not realize how many face palettes I have until I started pulling all of them out. This is literally only half of them, and not even all of them are on the screen right now. So we're gonna have to go through all of these palettes on the table first, then I will switch out to the other half of the palette. I feel like this one's gonna be a hard category for me to declutter because I love my face palettes, but I'm gonna try my hardest to get rid of as many as possible, but I have a feeling it might be a little bit tough for me to decide which ones to get rid of. So yeah, I hope you guys are all excited about today's video. If you are, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you're not already. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So first up, I have this highlighting palette here from Revolution. I've only used this a couple of times. I got it in an advent calendar during the holiday season. These highlighters have an interesting formula. They are not like very creamy, but they are like super blinding. They're kind of a very like thin formula. It's definitely interesting. They feel like baked highlighters, and these shades in here are really pretty. I actually really like this palette a lot, so I think for now I'm going to go ahead and keep it because the highlighters in here are so gorgeous. But this is one that I could definitely see myself getting rid of in the future, but for now I do want to keep it. Next up, we have another highlighting palette. This is the Palladio I'm Glowing highlighter palette, and I believe you can buy this at Sally Beauty. This is a very affordable palette, but these highlighters are actually really nice. They are very creamy. These do have pretty good pigmentation. I used to use this palette a lot, but I just haven't found myself reaching for it because I have so many other highlighters, so I think I'm going to go ahead and declutter this one. Next, we have this blush palette from City Color, and I believe I got this like in an Ipsy a long time ago, but I used to be obsessed with this blush palette. These are actually like super creamy blush shades. I used to use this all the time. This is like a very affordable palette, but the blush shades are actually like so pretty. They still swatch pretty nicely. I haven't used this in so long. This is another one that I think I'm going to go ahead and declutter just because I don't ever find myself reaching for it, so it's basically just taking up space in my collection. Next up, we have this Essence Matte Bronzing Powder Palette, and there was a time that I was like using this a ton. I actually haven't used this in quite a while. These are nice shades. I just haven't been reaching for it lately. I think I am going to go ahead and keep it because these are pretty nice. This might be like in a maybe pile for now. I'm going to say I'm going to keep it, but at the end of the video, I might get rid of it. I'm not 100% sure yet, just because I never really use this very often, but it is a good palette, so I don't know. I'm going to say I'm going to keep it, but it'll still be kind of like a maybe for right now. Next up, we have another contour palette. This one is from Profusion. This one has highlights, contour shades. I think I've actually only ever swatched this. I don't think I've ever used it. I don't see myself really using this palette. The highlighters are a little bit deep for my skin tone. I think I did just swatch them, and they are really pretty. Like, it definitely feels like this has good quality. Like that shade, it felt very creamy, but I just don't see myself using this, so I think I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this one. Next, we have my Natasha Denona Love Cheek Duo. This is a cream blush and highlighter. The highlighter is a little bit deep for my skin tone, but I love this cream blush. It is such a pretty shade. The highlighter is actually stunning as well, but I can only really use it when I am self-tanned. The blush is like so pigmented, so you do have to go in light-handed, and then look how gorgeous that highlighter is. I'm definitely going to be keeping this. I really love this, and the packaging is like to die for. All right, next up we have this Tarte palette. This was a limited edition holiday palette like years ago, and I love this palette so much. I have not wanted to get rid of it just because you can't get it anymore. I feel like this was such a good palette. Like these shades are so pretty in here, and the Tarte blushes are really nice. I just can't see myself getting rid of this because you cannot get it anymore, so I am going to be keeping it. Next up, I have these two Morphe blush palettes. We have the 8W Warm blush palette and the 8C Cool blush palette. Even though these are like really pretty palettes, I just never use these. Like, I never find myself reaching for these, and they are like bulky, so they're hard to travel with. I think I am going to go ahead and declutter both of these. Next up, I have another City Color palette, and this is another one that I used to love and used to use all the time. It is a highlighter palette. The shade in the middle was like one of my favorite highlighter shades a few years ago, but I just haven't been using this, so I am going to go ahead and get rid of it. This is the new Benefit Earth Angel Forescope palette, and I have been obsessed with this. I highly recommend this this palette. It has so many good shades in it. It has the iconic Hoola bronzer. We have this beautiful blush and one of my favorite highlighters, which is in the shade Cookie. This highlighter is like, oh my god, so blinding. I use this highlighter all the time. Look at that. Like, that is just such a beautiful highlighter. So yeah, I'm definitely going to be keeping this. I actually really recommend this palette, you guys. I do believe it comes in different shades, and they do sell it at Sephora. They might have it at Ulta as well. I'm not sure, but I have seen it at Sephora. This next palette is from BH Cosmetics. It is the BFF Face Palette, and I did review this entire collection. This one has a highlighter, a blush, and then 2 bronzer shades. This palette is a little bit deep for my skin tone, so I can only really use it when I'm self-tanned. Like, the highlighter is beautiful, and so is this shade right here, but I just find myself not being able to really use the bronzer shades. I think I'm going to put this in my maybe pile, or it might just stay in my keep pile until the end like that other palette, because I'm not 100% sure, since I don't really use this very often because the shades are just not the best for my skin tone, even though it is a really good quality palette. So I'm not sure if I want to keep it or not yet, but I'm going to put it in the yes pile until the end. Next, we have another limited edition palette that I just cannot get rid of. This was a palette that I was like obsessed with years ago. It's the Too Faced Love Flush Blush Wardrobe. Oh my gosh, I still love this palette. This has a bunch of beautiful shades of their Love Flush Blush, which they actually don't even make anymore. And this is like a collector's item, so I am definitely going to be keeping it. This is the BH Cosmetics Bellini palette, and this is a stunning blush palette. I love BH Cosmetics palettes. This one has so many good shades in it. The quality is really good. These have nice pigmentation, so I am definitely going to be keeping this one. I also have the BH Cosmetics Belgian Waffle palette, which is another stunning palette. This one has contour shades and gorgeous highlighters. I am going to be keeping this one as well because the quality of this is bomb. All right, next we have my first ever face palette, and this is the Anastasia Contour Kit. I bought this for my wedding, and this was the first ever face palette I ever had, and I used to be obsessed with it. I just like don't really use it anymore, but I feel like I'm having a hard time like even considering getting rid of it, because this is like an old favorite of mine. Like, this is what highlighters used to be, like so light and not really like metallic at all. I think I'm gonna keep it for now, but in the future I'll probably get rid of it. I'm just kind of attached to this one just because it was my first face palette. This next palette is from Sigma. It is their Sculpt palette, and I'm not the biggest fan of this palette. The only shade I really like is the highlighter shade right here. I just feel like these contour shades are just, they're not really the best, but this highlighter shade is really pretty. I cannot decide if I want to get rid of this or not, so this is gonna also go in my maybe pile. Now we have the Sigma blush palette, and I do enjoy this one a little bit more than the contour palette, but I'm still kind of on the fence with this one. I really only am able to use like these 2 shades right here. The rest of them I'm just not the biggest fan of. I don't know, this is probably also gonna go in my maybe pile. I feel like we're gonna have to go through a bunch of palettes at the end that I'm kind of on the fence about, because I'm kind of struggling on whether or not I want to get rid of this. Another one into the maybe pile. Okay, next up we have the Huda Beauty 3D highlighter palette. I know a lot of people do not like this palette, but I actually do enjoy some of the shades in here. We have a cream highlighter, which I never really use. We also have this beautiful shade, which is one of my favorites in the palette, which look at that. It's like super bright and metallic. I also really like the gold shade in this palette, and I never really use the blush topper, but I do enjoy this palette, and I think the quality is pretty good, so I am going to go ahead and keep it. This is one of my all-time favorite face palettes, so obviously I'm going to be keeping this one. It is the BH Cosmetics Blushing and Bali palette. I am always recommending this palette. It has 3 stunning blush shades, and the highlighters in here are like super creamy and super metallic. Like, if you want a blinding highlighter, you will want to get this palette. I cannot recommend it enough, and yeah, I could definitely not get rid of this. The next face palette is from Tarte. This is the Tarteist Pro Glow palette, and there was a time that I was using this a lot, but I just feel like the shades in here are not the greatest for my skin tone. I do really enjoy the blushes, but I can't really use the highlighters or bronzers in this palette, so I never really use it. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and declutter this one. I also have the Tarte Park Avenue Princess palette, and this one is a contouring palette. We have some matte highlighter shades, and the rest are all contour shades. I actually really do enjoy this palette, so I am gonna go ahead and keep this one. This one is from KKW Beauty. This was their contour and highlight palette, and I'm not even sure if they sell this anymore. I know KKW Beauty is like rebranding, but this has 2 highlighter shades and 2 like contour or bronzer shades. One of my bronzer shades broke, so I had to repress it, so it looks like terrible. I really like this shade right here. It is a nice shade, and then I do enjoy the highlighters. They're not the most like blinding, but they are better for like a natural type of highlight look. I think for now I'm gonna keep this palette, but this is one in the future I'll probably get rid of. We have another limited edition palette. This is the Urban Decay Game of Thrones Mother of Dragons palette. This one does not have wearable shades in it, but this is a collector's item, so I like kind of have to keep it. The shades are pretty, but I literally just never wear these because they're just not the most wearable shades, but I'm obsessed with the packaging and I love Game of Thrones, so I cannot get rid of this. The next palette is one from the Balm. This is the Girl Power Cheeks on the Go palette. This one is like so hard to open. I literally cannot stand this packaging, but this has some pretty shades in it. We have some blush shades. This one's kind of like a bronzer shade, but it could be used as a blush and then a highlight. I never use this palette. I'm just not the biggest fan of these shades, so I am gonna go ahead and declutter this one. This next palette I literally cannot stand. It's from Jouer. This is their Rose Cut Gems palette. I was so disappointed in this palette. Like, it really is just not the best. It has some pretty blush shades in here, but like this highlighter shade is so dry. Like, look at that. There is literally like no pigmentation to it. It's like super chunky. I'll try and swatch it for you guys. Like, it just does not look good at all. Like, it looks so chunky on the skin. The only blush shade I like is like this one and this one, but they are a little bit dry and patchy. So yeah, I do not like this palette at all. I am gonna go ahead and declutter it. Next up, we have this Marc Jacobs palette, and I love this palette. I use it all the time. I do not like the highlighter in here, but the bronzer and blush shade are beautiful. I use this palette so much, so yeah, I'm definitely going to be keeping it. Then we have this palette here from Pop Beauty, and I don't even know if I've ever actually used this. Maybe I used it one time, but it's their Prismatic Pop palette in the shade Pink Champagne. It has some blush shades, some highlight shades. I just don't really like this palette very much. I just feel like it's not the best quality, so I am going to go ahead and declutter this one. This palette is also one of my favorite face palettes. It is the Pixie and Rach Loves palette. The highlighters in here are literally so good. Like, these highlighters are so blinding and they're just beautiful. I am definitely going to be keeping this palette. I really enjoy it a lot. Next, we have the Sigma Chroma Glow highlighter palette, and I do not like this palette. Like, these shades are just not wearable. They do not look very pretty on the skin. Like, these are not blinding highlighters at all. I just don't think these look very nice, so I'm going to go ahead and declutter this palette. All right, moving on to round 2 of face palettes. I put the rest of them up here. They're not even all on the screen, I don't think, but we're going to go ahead and go through these. First up, we have this Wet n Wild My Melody and Kuromi palette. This was a limited edition palette. I am not the biggest fan of this palette. I just feel like it was like okay. It has a very strong fragrance. Like, this highlighter shade is pretty, and so is this blush shade, but I just don't really use like these bottom shades ever. I think I'm gonna put this in the maybe pile because it was limited edition, and I'm not sure if I want to keep it or not yet, but this might be a no, but I'm gonna put it in the maybe pile. Next up, we have this highlighting palette from Ofra, and they're like majorly canceled. I don't know if I want to keep this or not. I already did keep some of my other Ofra highlighters in one of my last declutters, and I think I'm just gonna like paint over the packaging or something. This palette's not my favorite, so you know what? I think I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of this one. Then I have this palette from Wonder Beauty. It's their Trip for Two palette, and it has a blush and like a contour shade. I do enjoy this palette, but I just don't ever really find myself reaching for it, so I don't know. This one might also go in my maybe pile. I'm gonna pull all of those out at the end. This next palette is from It Cosmetics, and this is like a bronzer, blush, and highlight palette. I love how it all kind of fades into each other, but I'm just not the biggest fan of the shades in here, so I think I'm gonna go ahead and declutter this one. We have another Ofra face palette. This was some, I don't know, Francesca Tolot. I think I did a review on this collection, and it has 2 bronzers, 2 blush shades. These bronzers are a little bit deep for my skin tone, and I'm not the biggest fan of the blush shades, so I'm gonna go ahead and declutter this one. Next up, we have this blush palette from Cover FX, and this was like such a big deal when it came out. I actually really enjoy the matte blush in the palette. I'm not the biggest fan of like the shimmery blush, but I do enjoy this palette, so I am gonna keep it. Next up, we have this palette from CoverGirl. This is the Full Spectrum Sculpt Expert palette, and this has 3 highlighter shades in here. These are actually really pretty and like very blinding, especially for like a drugstore highlighter. I actually really like this palette, so I'm gonna go ahead and keep it. The next palette is from the brand Bad Habit, which is like not even a thing anymore. This is the Paradise highlighter palette, and I believe this was like a dupe for the Huda Beauty palette. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what this was. I do have the Huda Beauty palette, so I don't need this one as well because the shades are literally the same. It has the same cream highlighter and then the other powder highlighters, so I am going to go ahead and declutter this one. Next we have the Pure 4-in-1 Blush Book. One of my shades was broken, so I did have to repress it. I don't know, I'm not the biggest fan of this palette. I just think the shades are like not very pretty, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of it. I literally never use this. Then we have the Iconic Benefit Cheek Leaders palette, and I love this palette. I use it all the time. It has the Hoola bronzer, cookie highlighter, and then the Gold Rush blush, which I love, so I'm definitely going to be keeping this. This was like a limited edition palette, I believe. Then I have these two palettes from Lovecraft Beauty. We have the bronzer palette and then the blush palette. These are pretty shades in here, but these are just two palettes that I literally never use, so I'm just going to get rid of them so they're not taking up space in my collection. Next up we have the Ofra Island Time palette. This is a blush palette and then there's one highlighter. I literally only use like these two shades in here and I never reach for the other one, so I'm going to go ahead and declutter this one. Then we have a palette from Essence. This is the Pure Nude Highlighter palette. I also don't really reach for this palette very often. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of the shades in here. They're just not, I don't know, they're not the best. I feel like they are like creamy, but they are a little bit like chunky. So yeah, I just never find myself reaching for this palette, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this one as well. I'm actually getting rid of way more palettes than I thought I was going to. Then I have this Jaclyn Cosmetics Bronzer and Blush Duo. I use this a lot, so I am going to keep it. I do really like the bronzer shade. It's a nice light but warm bronzer, and the blush is really pretty as well, but it is pretty sheer. It's not like my favorite palette, but I do actually use this a lot, so I'm going to keep it. Then we have this highlighting palette from Sleek, which used to be such a big deal. Like, these highlighters used to be like the most blinding highlighters ever. Now, not so much, but they are still really pretty. This is one of those like iconic palettes that I just cannot get rid of, so I am going to be keeping this. Pixie did recently just send me these two face palettes. We have the Mind Your Glow palette and the Shapeshifter palette. I haven't even opened these yet, so I think for now I am going to keep them. They're part of the Pixie Pretties collection. I'll probably try these out, and yeah, so I'm going to keep them since they are brand new. Then I have another Pixie face palette. This one is the Honey Nectar palette. This has blush, bronzer, and highlighter shades in here. I'm just not the biggest fan of these shades. I feel like the quality is not the best, so I am going to be getting rid of this one. Then I have this palette from Urban Decay. This is the Stay Naked Threesome palette, and this has a bronzer, a highlighter, and a blush. I'm not like super into this palette. I do think the blush is really pretty. The bronzer is not my favorite, and the highlighter is like not very blinding. I think for now I'm gonna keep it, but this is one that I'll probably get rid of in the future. Then I have this palette from Jaclyn Cosmetics, which is the highlighter palette, and I use this literally every single day. I'm obsessed with the shade Iced. I think this is such a pretty highlighter shade. All of the shades in this palette are actually like gorgeous, and I use these all the time, so I am definitely keeping this. Okay, I grabbed all of my Maybe palettes. Let's first start with the Essence one. This is the Matte Bronzing palette. I think for this one, I'm gonna go ahead and keep it. Next, we have the two Sigma face palettes. I think I'm gonna go ahead and just get rid of both of these because I have not used them in such a long time. I'm also going to be decluttering the Wet n Wild My Melody and Kuromi palette. I just don't ever use this, and yeah. I don't know, it's cute, but I just don't see myself using this in the future. I also think I'm going to declutter the Wonder Beauty palette because, I don't know, I have so many blush and bronzer palettes, and I just don't see myself using this one very often. And then I am going to be keeping the BH Cosmetics BFF palette for now, just because this one is newer to my collection. Alright, so here are all of the palettes that I'm decluttering. They're literally not even all in the frame. I'm actually shocked with how many I ended up getting rid of. I did count all of them, and I am going to be decluttering 25 palettes, and then I only kept 26 palettes. So I literally got rid of half of them. I did not expect that coming into this declutter because I thought I was going to be more attached to these palettes, but I just realized that a lot of these have been just sitting in my collection, which is literally just a waste of space. So I'm really proud with how many I got rid of today. So yeah, I hope you guys all enjoyed today's video. If you did, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you're not already. Leave a comment down below with what kind of declutter you guys want to see next. And also make sure you guys turn on your notifications so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. All you have to do is click the bell next to the subscribe button, and then you'll receive a notification every time I upload a new video. And I will see you guys in my next video. Thank you so much for watching.